Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Post Plan. This is the CSGO After Show, where we take a closer look at some of our favorite plays from the previous tournament and really take a closer look at stuff we didn't really get time to talk about during an event we worked or otherwise. If we're just reviewing the event and seeing something cool we liked, we're going to put it into this show and we're going to talk about everything Counter-Strike over the last couple of weeks. My name is Dinko. I'm going to be joined by the wonderful squad of Maui, Hawka, and Bleh for this one. And they're some of the best minds in Counter-Strike, some of them very recognized this year, so we say, actually finally starting to get some of recognition of how good these guys can be, and we're going to get into their minds. That's going to be a real fun time. First of all, how you guys doing? Starting with you, Maui.
Doing good. I just set up this whole wherever I am right now. I'm actually in my girlfriend's apartment in West Hollywood, and I mean, shouts out to Faceit, honestly, because they just gave me a computer today and a monitor. So like, you guys are sweet. I love you guys.
Yeah, we kind of got all this set up like a Formula One pit stop, right? Just got the PC in, got everything ready to go. But coming into this one, Hawka, this has been in the works for 9 days, right? We've been ready to get into the action. How do you really feel about Blast so far? How have you really felt about this tournament?
Okay, firstly, Dinko, one thing I don't feel good about is I don't know if you can see this scratch on my nose, but I basically lost a fight against my dog. So like, it's not a great start. But overall, like Blast has been good. I like having these separate groups. It's kind of nice to get a feel for the teams before you get into the big tournaments of the year. And I'm excited, man. I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, me too. I'm really looking forward to this one. And obviously, we're going to get into the real topics now and really look at things, Bleh. When we take a look at the first group, there was quite a lot of upsets and a lot of moments that were really questionable. We started with NIP coming into it. With this NIP roster, for a long time, it's really felt like this team have so much potential, but they're just so average.
Yeah, right. But at the same time, like one thing everyone's been talking about with this NIP team is how the logo sucks, honestly. But it's kind of grown on me, primarily because they have been surprising, especially a couple of these new players, one player in particular jumping in, catching a lot of us by surprise. And I feel it kind of set the precedent for the rest of the groups as well. We saw some of the favorites playing the way we expected them to do. We saw some of the bigger names falling on the wayside. And we saw some of these teams with like a stand-in, maybe a new player coming in, really catching us all by surprise. So I feel like NIP's performance in that Group A kind of set the stage, so to speak, for some of the other teams in Group B and Group C.
Yeah, well, that player you're talking about, that new up-and-coming player for NIP is, of course, Maui Snake's favorite player, ZTR. He was talking about before the event how he's going to add so much firepower to the team. And Maui, when we look at ZTR, and we'll bring him up and take a closer look at him, this player really has had no experience near the top at all.
No. And for people that aren't in on the joke that you're going for there, that I was pretty critical of this pickup for ZTR. I actually feel like when you look at his stats, when you actually watch the games back that he played for Young Ninjas, which is the roster that he was on before this, and full-blown NIP, the grown ninjas, the veterans, it's not looking good. I mean, he doesn't always have the most firepower as a player. It doesn't always feel like his decision-making is really on point. But this opening series versus Astralis proved me completely wrong. He looked really good in that super steady piece for them, and it'll be fun to see what they can do with him moving forward.
So, Hawka, we've seen this year and last year, we've seen a couple of these players that have come from these academy teams, some of the players that haven't really played near the top at all, and they've come in and played pretty well. Do you feel like that's a lot because of we're in the online era, right? You're still playing in a very comfortable environment. It's not such a jump up.
I think that is part of it, especially with the whole 6-man roster thing some teams are doing. That's obviously really helpful to maybe just get a player in on 1 or 2 maps to begin with, really help them get as much practice in on those maps as possible so that they can really feel comfortable and then maybe start to integrate them more. So I definitely think that's part of it. But the other part is probably just how deep Europe is, especially in terms of having solid teams. It actually means you can get pretty good practice and competition at those lower tier levels for some of these academy teams. So they actually are getting some decent experience under their belt, even if it may not seem like it.
One of the teams heading into Blast that we were really looking forward to seeing how they were going to play is Complexity, right? This team have had such a bad road, a bad time of things over the last couple of events, having to use Yugi as a stand-in, not really performing too well and losing, going out last in a lot of tournaments. But in this tournament, they were all together for the first time playing in their bootcamp facility. Also, Poison comes back into the team. So finally, we've got the full 5-man roster of Complexity. And Blood, these guys were looking on fire.
Oh, they were looking so good, and I feel like Poison. He wasn't necessarily the star player. It was kind of stolen by Config and Blamef as well, really having a hell of an event alongside JKS. But him coming in for me felt like kind of the catalyst for the team, right? He came in, he had a pretty decent showing, he did his role well, but it felt like the gang's all back together. They're looking really good, really sharp, and they I think had perhaps the most dominant run we saw in all the three groups. Given the group wasn't the hardest, especially with Vitality losing Apex halfway through and some of the teams kind of falling off there. But you can't take it away from him. So him coming together with the rest of his pack, it's making me once again being a little bit more invested in this complexity experiment. They had kind of fallen off a bit, but things are looking really good right now.
Now let's talk about JKS, Alex, because when we take a look at this player, you were obviously tweeting about him, Hawka, a lot, and saying how this player seems to be fitting in much more now that he's actually playing with the team.
Yeah, we've always seen Complexity have just a generally positive vibe to the team, which I know is something that's weird to say, but you watch the clips, you see BlameF and Config, very loose guys, always trying to have fun. I think just being in person with them is going to make a big difference to someone like JKS, who always has been a player who can maybe sometimes collapse in on himself more than anything else. He's not going to rage outwardly at anyone, but you know sometimes he's going to be annoyed at himself. So it feels like we're really getting to see him flourish now on this team. And one of the really positive signs for me is that he had the highest T rating out of any player on Complexity. That's more of what we need to see from him, because he is in some of those good spots on the T side, and he's finally putting it together. It's great to see.
Yeah, that was one of your main criticisms from some of your previous videos about JKS, right? He's fitted in to the team on the CT side relatively well, but on that T side, it seems a little bit uncomfortable. Now, Bleh, when we're looking at this team overall, we already kind of touched on the fact that Poison wasn't really stepping up. You said that Config was, but when we look at this team overall, BlameF was that second star, man. He was really up there, really rivaling Config at those top spots.
Yeah, which is nuts, right? I mean, like, we know that it is being the era of in-game leaders were also fraggers at the same time, but the amount of impact BlameF has is nuts. Especially, I really do enjoy watching Mirage, right? I really like watching the team play Mirage, and it feels like it's so reliant on Config popping off and have him having a really good game. And I always wait for the moment they pick Mirage and he doesn't have a good game, but it never seems to happen. It just boggles my mind how consistent Config can be on Mirage. And all he needs is a partner in the form of a Rush. Maybe BlameF stopping up, maybe Poison just doing his job, right? And it's someone just works every single time. And yeah, you can't take away BlameF. He's been fantastic. The team as a whole look good. And I think it's going to lead to a very interesting near future for some of the events they're going to be playing. They are a team I am easily giving my top 3 to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, they've been looking fantastic, at least in this Blast tournament. We'll see if they can keep it up. But one of the teams that looked better in Blast than they did previous, again, very similar storyline to Complexity, is EG Maui. No, this team were looking real rough. Just the tournament before was a DreamHack Open with barely any good teams in it, and they go out in groups to FPX. This team have been struggling, but they look better in this tournament.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like we saw a return to form for a couple of their players. Breezy is definitely the player I've kind of been the most critical of, but also it's because I expect the most out of him. I feel like he's all in all the highest ceiling player for EG, and finally it feels like he's actually playing to his level at times. It's not consistently always topping the charts. I still feel like I'm seeing a lot out of Ethan more consistently. I feel like I'm seeing a lot out of Cirque, but this time around, I definitely noticed that Breeze was on top of his game, and that is just such a pleasant sight, because as an NA fan, as someone that's living here and just rooting for my region, the way Breeze came up into the scene was this super high skill player, and they put him into so many positions with high impact. And if he's not able to capitalize, EG don't have a really great win condition. So he needs to play well. And the fact that he is really showed.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing if EG can keep this up. You know, the team I was starting to say maybe had a bit of a problem culturally. It feels like, you know, when you're looking at this roster, they were just in such a negative downturn, even after so much time. But it really was a flip reverse over this event play in terms of everything that happened. We've seen a team Vitality, who were just winning, staying at the top towards the end of 2020, looking really consistent last year, completely fall off. And it was a question that we had coming into the first couple of days, like, how has this happened to Vitality? But we got to figure that out. And Apex is actually leaving this roster. He's taking a little bit of a break away from playing Counter-Strike. And man, you could see the stress on him. We don't really know if it's something outside of the game or inside, but something's definitely up there. And I don't know where Vitality fare without Apex right now, because they look very lost.
Yeah, and even the statement they made, I really don't want to get into like what really happened, but it's very confusing, right? They were like talking about pressure at the same time. There's something personal issues, whatever it is. I hope he does come back, but I have to agree with you. I don't think it's coincidence that they've had perhaps one of the most shocking performances we've seen from them in a while, with Apex kind of struggling. Even the first game he played, you could see like the pressure seemed to be getting to him. We saw Zyro have his worst map ever or something like that. It's looked rough for them, but to just touch upon what you mentioned earlier, like for EG. I feel like the entire trip so far in EU, if you look at the overall results, it doesn't look that great, but I feel like they've been very unlucky. Every time I watch them play, it's like the clutches don't go the way. It's like something just falls apart. And the games are very close, mind you. So if like a couple of things had gone their way here and there, I feel like they would have had a pretty, if you look at their overall results in the past few months, you'd be like, they've done a pretty decent job. It's just been a little unlucky, but at least this time around in Blast, they were able to kind of convert it. They still had very close games, but at least they came out on top, well, second in the group.
Well, definitely looking much better. And when we take a look at this new FaZe Clan team, because they were looking much better, right? This team were coming into this event, we know that we're going to get Carrigan. Everybody kind of knew it's the worst kept secret, ladies and gentlemen. But we will be talking about this new roster after the break, alongside some in-depth looks at some of the rounds we liked from Blast Premier. Don't go anywhere.
Bomb has been planted. Bomb has been planted.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a post plan. We just talked about all the relevant news and touching on some of our very basic thoughts of Blast Premier that just passed on. But now we're going to take a closer look at some of the plays we enjoyed. And to join me and do that is, of course, Maui, Snake, Hawka, and Bleh. And we're going to start with Maui, because there was one particular match that really stood out right to kick off Blast. And that was, again, the NIP upset over Astralis. And you want to take us through a specific play and how Hampus is one of the most annoying players to play against.
Yeah, definitely. Hampus here in the clip that we're going to be seeing is just breaking the logic of Counter-Strike. And so the way this one kicks off is some early water control for NIP. We can see that Hampus is inserting himself into that position, takes the duel against the opposing IGL in Glaive, takes him down, and then he just posts himself up at short. And when I've talked to teams and coaches anonymously, I can't give away any names. Someone has said this guy plays like a moron. It is so hard to play against like Hampus, a player like Hampus, because he just does so many different things all the times. It feels like Hampus just gets to do whatever he wants any given time. So we'll see that in this 5v4 advantage, Astralis are going to set themselves up for some water retake utility. We've got Zipnix and Magisk still here on the B bomb site, and there will be a Molotov headed to ZTR in that Crim's cubby there down at water. And Hampus, he falls off of this and will actually make his way back towards Monster. And so once they actually throw this sort of utility here, as we will see, Magisk, he goes for a little bit of a peek. Zipnix is far back still. ZTR, he just smokes out that molly. Nothing too crazy about that. Magisk realizes he can't do anything. And Hampus, despite having the man advantage, just says, oh, you guys are doing something? I'm just going to get in your faces. He pushes out Monster right now, catches off Magisk, and then he's able to get the headshot victory over on Zipnix as well. And that is just the most annoying thing. I mean, how do you even play against a player like this that just doesn't respect your timings, the way you want to play back into a round? Because modern Counter-Strike logic, or just the fundamentals of it, would say, okay, we have the 5v4, we should group up, we should try to just force them to make a mistake. But Hampus actually says, while you guys are trying to correct the situation, I'm going to actually just push out and kill you. And it's just like the push and pull of the game, Hampus disrespects it completely.
I think Hampus is one of those players that we've looked at as just one of these only up-and-coming IGLs as well. So it's funny to see him make such plays that everyone would kind of say is unorthodox, maybe a little bit brain dead. But, you look at this, he's one of the upcoming IGLs and the only one in Sweden, right? And that's been such a weird talking point for such a long time, is the fact that there's no IGLs really coming out of Sweden, Hawka.
Yeah, and it's nice they finally have one here on NIP. I think NIP have been playing a solid style for a while now. I don't think anyone has been complaining about the in-game leading of NIP, really. That's never been the concern. I think any team that plays Overpass to a high level, like NIP, are normally going to have a good in-game leader behind them. And the other thing about Hampus with those information plays is that even if he doesn't win the fights, it's so nice having your in-game leader at the center of the action. He can very quickly make those calls. And we all know that Counter-Strike is a game that comes down to those small timing windows. So Hampus being at the forefront of the action can quickly make calls, or he can just kill you like he did in that round.
Yeah, when we look at Hampus, Bleh, I've really enjoyed his rise up from the Gamer Legion ranks, the MDL ranks. It took a while for him to get into this team, but what are your thoughts on Hampus as a player overall?
I think Maui and Hawka just nailed it right there on the head. Like even that round which Maui showcased, right? Like I agree with him that 4v5, you try to force your opponents to make a mistake, but even the timing he went for that play. Now I'm not too sure. I didn't watch that game. I'm not sure if it was a tell when he knew that a Molly was going to be taking place, that they would kind of leave Monster to be concentrating more towards short. But it's kind of like a mixture of two things. One, going against the logic of traditional Counter Strike. At the same time, he was going for a smart play, like Maui pointed out, kind of orthodox as well. But yeah, I feel this is still a young NIP. I know a lot of people got really hyped with ZTR having 2 great opening games, but it's 2 best-of-3 games online. I'm still going to be a little reserved about this. I've been burned too many times by getting overhyped by, up-and-coming players and teams. So I'm going to bide my time. But I feel it is a very good sign, especially in maps like Overpass, more tactical maps, a new player coming in, looking so good on the T side and whatnot. It's a good sign.
I mean, Bleh getting hyped up about teams that have started to play better. I mean, he is the delusional Tyloo fan, so it all adds up. But, Maui, this isn't you done, right? You've got more to look at. We've got another round coming up. It's round 19 of Astralis versus NIP. And this is a round where Astralis are just playing kind of bad, like getting caught out by some of the individuals here of NIP. And you want to take us through it?
Yeah, so what we're going to be seeing here in this one is how Astralis actually aren't able to convert a 5v3 advantage. You would think that a team of Astralis' caliber, and really any team at Blast Premier, should be able to convert a situation such as this, but it just doesn't happen. And I kind of... throughout a lot of this game, and I'm sure we can talk about this more as a group later, I was wondering, is Astralis making just way more mistakes, or is NIP actually playing very well? And this is a round that has me leaning a little bit towards the side of maybe Astralis just isn't in the form that they normally would be, because you'll see here during the default, Device was able to find the first kill, and then they will be able to take down Rez here in the bathrooms. And another just kind of fundamental Counter-Strike call is the whole 1 in fake, 2 in take. Astralis just got 2 kills on the A side of the map. They should take it, according to that phrase. But they actually decide to slow the round down, wait until 20 seconds are left on the clock, and then try to jump out the connector door here. And there's a player at Plopsky that spotted these players coming out, but ZTR just mows them all down as they actually try to eventually get into water. And we could see his individual talent on display here, which is a lot of fun to watch. But at the same time, why is Astralis trying to go into water with 20 seconds left, despite the fact that they have a lot of utility? They could have just thrown an execute onto the A bomb site. I felt like there were more options for them there in this particular round, and felt just so forced in a way that I'm not used to seeing Astralis play like that. But at the same time, I got to give credit to NIP, because they played it in a pretty strange way as well. They had 3 players on B, probably just were going to say, you know what, if Astralis comes B, we'll win because we're stacked there, but if they go A, we'll just save.
I mean, I do feel from what we've just seen, I think Astralis certainly are making more mistakes, and we'll get to see that a little bit later on as well, Bleh. But, from your perspective, do you feel like it is Astralis making more mistakes than usual? Or do you feel like it's a combination of both? Are NIP playing well and Astralis making too many mistakes, or is it mainly the weaknesses of Astralis?
I think it's a combination of both. I don't want to take anything away from NIP. Some of these plays they made, it's not just 1 or 2 rounds. Sure, Astralis made a mistake over there, but there are many rounds where they got outplayed by NIP, right? Like Hampus being an annoyance, the team as a whole looking pretty damn solid. I think it's a combination of both. I think it was Hawka who brought up as well how Zonic mentioned that they have been really just working on the individuals. It was an Astralis who looked a little rough around the edges. Maybe they really haven't warmed into the season here. So I'm not going to read too much into it. Astralis is Astralis. They should be jumping back in. But at the same time, yeah, I have to just agree with you there. It's a combination of both. NIP looking good. Also, a new player coming in means, roles will be switching up a bit. And whatever research you might have done in NIP, there could have been some differences in the way they played out in the server. Right? It was the first time we've seen ZTR play with them. So yeah, combination of multiple factors and upset on the cards.
At Hawka, one of the main criticisms we've had about Astralis is the fact that sometimes they lack in the pistol rounds. So if you're losing against some of these rounds where you have the guns out and you really need to put these in the bag if you're going to be having a pretty bad start, do you feel like that's going to be something that is going to affect Astralis long term?
I almost wonder whether it affected them slightly at this event, because like Bleh was saying there, right, the whole picking up on Sonic saying they were focusing on individual skill does that come back to them just losing so many pistol rounds that they think that's what they need to work on? Because that's what a lot of teams think pistol rounds come down to, right? And if I'm looking at Astralis, especially coming off of a player break, I'm making sure I have that team play back up to the highest level. I'm not looking at individual skill, right? These guys have probably played Counter-Strike a bit during the off period. I'm sure they haven't lost all their skill during the player break. It's just a really weird call that Zonic said that in the interview after the game. And I think Zonic even said after the tournament in that interview, he kind of alluded to the fact that they might have to shift their focus going forwards. And I think that's probably what we see ahead of the next tournaments, is them looking more at getting that classic Astralis team play back on board.
Well, Maui, you have another clip where Astralis kind of make a little bit of a blunder coming up. It's a force buy round from the NIP side that actually Astralis go on to lose against. So we're going to take a closer look at that one.
Yeah, so this is going to be on the second map of Inferno, and it's a little bit of Astralis making a mistake, but also it's one of those moments where should we give NIP, or how much credit should we be giving NIP for this one? Because it was a very good little push from them to come out with some good utility on top of that. So we've got ZTR here behind the first oranges, Plopsky's on top of the second oranges, and Magisk, if I'm not mistaken, is going for just a little bit of a peek into the B site. He gets caught off because he doesn't expect the angle. Then ZTR sets himself up with his own little pop flash over the oranges. That's the nice little lineup where it just bounces off of the missile cylinders. And because of that, they're able to find a couple of kills. And the way Astralis tried to recover the situation was by dry peeking in. So Glaive actually ended up dying there. And now Hampus and the rest of the NIP crew, they're already rotated in. They have a lot of players here on this bomb site. And all in all, it's just a really solid cleanup for NIP. But it's, again, one of those rounds that I just have to think about where is Astralis here playing this as well as they normally are? Or is NIP going above and beyond in actually countering them? Because I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, you don't just let Astralis lose. Astralis never just lose a game. They don't just throw the whole thing. So NIP had to be doing some things right. But I will say that I think NIP's success here in Group A was a little bit due to the fact that maybe Astralis weren't playing at 100% level, which I think everybody else has talked about, that it doesn't feel like coming after player breaks, usually they're, or even the beginning of a year, they're at their best form.
And when we're looking at NIP, I want to focus in on those guys because we know Astralis have a lot of problems to fix, but let's look at the positive side of things. Bleh, I know you're a big optimist. You're always very positive about things. I mean, all the time. And so we look at this NIP team and their future as a roster. Do you think they're going to be able to maintain this level? I mean, they have so much skill, but it's just finding that consistency to be able to stay at this level that they've never really been able to find.
It's a group stage, man. Now, let's be real here. We had OG looking shockingly rough in the tournament with Astralis, like we pointed out. You know, they were getting punished for the mistakes they made. I mean, again, credit to NIP for punishing them, but I really haven't seen them. And then they had that huge win over Big. You can't take that away, but then they lost them in the final. So if you look at it overall, the sample size is still a little too small for me to really, but I mean, say like they're going to be like the next big Swedish thing. They're going to be the next big EU team to come out and pop off. Rez, Plopsky, you have Knock, and this new kid on the block, ZTR. I still feel it's too early to call. I want to see them play a couple more events, at least one more event before I can really make a judgment on this. But I feel like we're not taking too much away from them, like we've pointed out. It's been teams maybe taking them a little for granted, maybe taking it a little bit more easier. They might have come in prep. Like you have Big and Astralis. They're going to be prepping primarily for each other, right? And then maybe a little bit for OG. You look at NIP, you're like, they're the underdogs in this particular group. And you're like, they have a new player coming on in. It's going to be comparatively easier. Maybe they did take it a little easy. And we saw the way Big were able to win pretty convincingly at the end in the finals when they had the rematch over NIP, right? So I'm gonna just kind of like hold off a little bit and then maybe be a little bit more optimistic later on.
Well, Hawka, we're going to take a look at some of the plays you've got for us, and you were actually lucky enough to be able to be the analyst to get to focus on this FaZe team, right? And I think coming into this, people were expecting them maybe to play a bit better with Twist, but the level they brought out was actually insane. So you want to take us through the first clip? It's round 14 against Navi. I mean, they played them twice. There's plenty of action going across these two series, but this is the round you want to break down first.
Yeah, I wanted to look at Train first because normally I feel like teams just coming in with a new roster move and no real IGL would struggle on the T side of Train. But FaZe showed a real willingness to play some slow rounds, and this is an example of that. We get the two standard smokes out through A early. This is common to try and take some information away from the CTs, but then Na'Vi have some nades and they dunk them right onto Rain. As this is happening, though, we have got the players on the other side of the map for FaZe taking Brown Hall's control. And at this point, Na'Vi obviously have that man advantage, so they don't decide to stick around with this massively aggressive setup on the B site. But then we get this electronic play. He was doing this a lot this game. He was trying to solo take fights, and he was winning a lot of them. But in this round, Twist is one step ahead of it. He could have been playing anti-flash there, but he was looking for the angle, so he gets that kill. And then FaZe just slow it down. There's still over a minute left on the clock here, and they're just going to chill. They're going to sit in their own side of the map. They feel comfortable doing this, running down the clock to the late round. They're not even really drawing out that much utility either, but Boomich goes up the ladder thinking it's a B play so late in the round. And look at the composure here for FaZe. They're instantly straight back down. Twist has made the call. He can get to the site. He's got the molly out to cut off the rotation. They get onto the site incredibly quickly. And just how decisive this call was is a really good sign for FaZe. You might not expect them to be able to make the calls so quickly to all come into position, but they do just that. And even though Perfecto makes this a close round at the end here and overperforms in this clutch attempt, it's that man Twist who was on top of this round from the beginning, and at the end eventually broke. He's going to close this one out in the clutch. Perfecto does his best, but this was just a really well played round from FaZe, and I didn't expect them to be willing to prod the map and then really go for a late call like this, but they did. Na'Vi maybe fell for it a bit harder than they should have, but you've got to give credit to FaZe for being willing to play such a slow round.
Yeah, the thing is with FaZe in this tournament, they seem much more composed. They seem much more happy, right? We were talking about how the mentality of this team's completely shifted. There's been such a negative performance coming out of FaZe for so long. And now it looks like the light at the end of the tunnel's here. Twist has come over from Canada. You're going to have Carrigan coming in. The attitude from these players, we know how good they can be, but they're finally going to get to show it. And that's something we've been waiting for a very long time when it comes to this FaZe team. And just looking at the mentality, Bleh, you can see they're just so calm under pressure. This FaZe Clan team, to me, it looked impressive just from the fact that we're able to make calls like that.
I'm someone who doesn't really, harp on the entire team spirit, so to speak, or how.
Of course you don't. Of
The
course you don't.
atmosphere
Bad
is and
humbug,
whatnot.
Bleh.
And there are reasons for that, right? Because there's certain teams, if you look at some of the CIS teams, for example, they're more loud and aggressive, and they're more emotive when they lose a round and whatnot. But that's what works for them. But for FaZe, you can really see the difference in their body language and how they're playing, all off having a hell of a tournament from after such a long time. There's no pressure whatsoever. Everyone's waiting for the next step. And yeah, I think Hawka mentioned as well, or was it Maui you mentioned about how Carrigan would have helped them out a little bit when it comes down to prepping a little bit before him joining the team. So a lot of good things going the way. And yeah, I mean, just to finish that thought, Dinko, like you pointed out, you have Cold Sarah, you have Brokey, you have Rain. I mean, these guys, Cole and Rain, you don't really have to talk much about. Everyone knows who they are. Everyone knows what they have done and what they can do. Brokey has been looking absolutely fantastic so far. Now you have Twist joining in, and his debut game was fan-fucking-tastic. Pardon my French. I don't even know if you're supposed to swear right now on this show yet, but he was amazing. And then you have Olof. Unfortunately, a swan song performance for him. I'm sure we're going to see him back in some other team, hopefully in a Swedish revitalization happening in the near future. And we have Carrigan coming in. So for once, after a very, very long time, I'm excited about FaZe once more.
Well, it does have feelings. And while we're getting into the next one, Hawka, and we take a look. No, he doesn't. Just for a look at him. But going into the next round, obviously, we were taking a look at a different team within this group, Alex. And I mean, Liquid, right? They looked pretty good the first outing, but this time they looked a little flatter at times. So talk us through this one.
Yeah, this is kind of a tale of two different sides of Liquid, because I'm going to show you a round that they won, but I'm going to show you how hard it was for them to win it, in a sense, I guess. I don't know. We'll go into it here. Cold Zero has pushed all the way into B tunnels early in this round. FaZe have full long control to start with. This is normally fine. Normally you can go up long, you can start to take that A site, but FaZe are going to have a lot of players rotated over to A in this round. You can see the minimap is starting to look scary if you are Team Liquid right now as you work up through long. They throw one of the cross smokes. They don't throw the other one, though, as they start to use the nades into the site. Stewie's going to go through CT with a flashbang, take an aggressive fight, and this is the Stewie popping off with some kills onto the site here. He had to do something in this round. He gets aggressive and gets set up for some of these early kills, and then just keeps going. Another nice shot onto the site. Even though they run into the stack, Stewie ends up getting 4 kills on the round. But if you look a little closer at exactly what's going on here, Naf isn't using this second smoke for the cross, which he could do if he wanted to. He's actually going to set this smoke up to land in CT late in the round. You can see him having to watch the flank because Liquid know they have no map control. This smoke is going to go down, but the smoke doesn't land until the peak comes in. And look at where Olof's looking. He's looking at the gap in the smoke. So this is a purposely planned play from Liquid to be a bit cheeky with it, flash themselves through the smoke. I think I have seen a couple of teams do this before, but the fact that FaZe had pretty much 5 players on the A site and they still lost there, it's weird. It's kind of a good thing for Liquid that they were able to get it done. They were able to frag out like that. And I really like that they have a couple of different approaches to that A site. But if they're winning rounds like that, why didn't they do better at this tournament?
Yeah, that's the weird thing, right? The Liquid have come into this. It felt like they got off to a pretty slow start against FaZe. And I mean, they had one of the most difficult groups, right? You just look at this group, how many good teams are in it, Maui. You know, do you really feel like Liquid underperformed here? Do you feel like they can do much better?
They definitely underperformed. They should have beaten. I mean, there's no way that a FaZe team that's brand new should be beating this Liquid with the fact that they've been practicing for 4 months now, more or less. So I think that play was really cool, and I would have loved to see how Liquid develop their playbook moving forward, because they can use their skill in situations like that to actually shift the odds. Because I mean, CS being a game where you're always trying to find the most advantageous situation for yourself or your team, if you can actually trust your aim in situations like that, where maybe that play looked really good and it worked out perfectly the way that Olaf was holding the left side of the smoke. But also, if there were a rifler in CT, they would have to take that fight. And it's cool to see that Liquid are trusting themselves and they're making explosive plays, but at the same time, they need a little bit more consistency from me.
When it comes to Liquid as well, you don't really see it from this play, Bleh, but you know, there has been a little bit of criticism around Fallen in terms of his individual level from a couple players, people in this tournament. I mean, taking a look at Fallen, you know, he is being brought into this team not just to call it all, right? He's the AWPer of this team. That's his role, getting brought into this team. How have you felt this has gone so far for Liquid?
Well, clearly not so well, but I don't agree with putting the blame solely on on Fallen, right? And I think Maui he's just got the point right there. The fact that sure, that play worked out, Stewie pushing into the smoke, classic Stewie move right there. It's not consistent, it's not sustainable, and that's the one thing I saw from Liquid this tournament is how maybe they're too much in their own heads. I'm not too sure. There's also the fact that I do want to point out that with Twist joining FaZe and with FaZe beating Liquid, there has to be an element of Twist, having an idea of how they played, considering for how long he was in the Liquid lineup. So that might be a factor as well. I don't want to put it solely on Fallen. I feel like as a team, sure, they might have disappointed, but so did teams like G2 as well. Mm-hmm. And obviously this Liquid lineup is a way more new team than G2 are. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt for the time being. I think Fallen can really pop off. We saw some elements of how he used to, just be unplayable at times with the big green. And for me personally, having an AWP player in this Liquid lineup, a pure-blooded AWPer, especially like Fallen, especially when he doesn't have to be burdened with the calling duties, it's exciting for me. I won't lie. Sure, this was a disappointment, but I do at least want to see another event before I can be like, okay, this might not really be the 5 right players in the server.
On a more positive note, Hawka, you have another play really bigging up FaZe Clan right here. They look good in a lot of the early rounds. And you've got one here on Inferno where FaZe Clan just start off with a pretty good game plan coming into it.
Yeah, I think FaZe did surprisingly well in early sort of halves or early rounds of the half on their T side. This is an example of that. We only really need to look at the minimap to show this play to begin with. Bit gets forced off of long early round in the half. So Simple might have had an AWP in a different round. He might have been able to hold more aggressively, but Bit, being the 6th man in the lineup, decides to go passive onto A, and look at all this real estate, man. They are wrapping the B bomb site. It doesn't help that Na'Vi's weaponry isn't great, but Perfecto's utility isn't good enough to help him out here. Twist wins this fight, and Boomich is just dead at this point. There's no way he can get in. They still have nades as well, so they end up smoking off Banana. Brokey got those 2 kills off the back of that smoke right there, and Electronic is stuck not being able to do anything in that round. And I don't know how true this is, But I heard in some of my Twitter replies that apparently some people were saying Carrigan might have helped with some anti-stratting. He might have helped with some early rounds, some ideas for what they should do. That round looked like a really good read to force Bit away from long. He went far too far back into the A site. And then in the next round after that, they actually did a similar thing where they pressured long. But then there was an over-rotation to long, and they ended up pushing up the short side and getting the A side. So there was a lot of early round success on their T sides. And man, if Carrigan helped in any of that, I'm so excited for the future.
Well, so am I. And let's just talk about this FaZe Clan roster then, right? We've got Carrigan coming in. We've got Twist in the roster now as well. This is looking like a very exciting team to get behind Maui, and I certainly see this team going to the top.
Yeah, I think that this FaZe lineup here is just incredibly well constructed. It's basically what Cloud9 wishes they did. I'll say that, because you want to have this much star power. You want to have this veteran IGL that has proven he is capable with just a variety of rosters at this point. Everything about this FaZe lineup to me says success. I think the one thing I have to worry about just a little bit is how they're going to perform, not for the first 6 months, because honestly, I feel like they're going to do great, but kind of months 8, 9, and 10, where they maybe have won a tournament or two, but then they find themselves getting a little bit stale, because that's where it always feels like Carrigan rosters just fall off a little bit. The fact that the first year can go great, but some reason year 1.4, 1.5, it's just it all starts to the distrust. But maybe, I think that might be because of Nico, actually. So maybe this roster doesn't have that problem. Hopefully they don't. I hope to see a long-term success with this FaZe lineup.
I also think, just quickly adding on to that, like, this is a team where the expectations are so high, right? You can't have that sort of period in mouse sports where you are struggling a bit. Like, you have to be pretty much a top 5 team, I feel like, with this roster. So that's got to play into it as well. Carrigan can't really afford to have that down period at any point here.
Yeah, I feel like when you look at this team, Bleh, we've talked about the fact that Carrigan's come in and he is the big talking point. When it comes to Twist, though, he actually seemed to me, when we were looking at some of the behind the scenes or listening to their columns of the teams, he seemed like a completely different player for me than he did in Liquid in terms of his comfortability in the team. Immediately, he was hyping the team up a lot. And to me, when I was looking at some of the Liquid columns out of the Blast, sometimes he's a little bit quieter, sometimes he wasn't adding as much. But he's come into this team and he seems to be really comfortable and he's very vocal. And that's something he didn't really have before in Liquid, at least from what we've seen from the outside.
It's like when you go to college for the first time and you go to like I don't know, like a frat house party or something. I haven't been to a frat house party, but then you go there, you find a bunch of new people. You're like, oh my God, this guy's pretty cool. And you like try to make friends. You're extra sociable. You're extra happy and excited to be there, and you're just having fun. Also, bear in mind, this is probably the easiest debut for Twist in this team, right? Yes, the expectations are high, but you're playing the final event with all of mine, so everyone's waiting for Carrigan to come in. There's not much pressure to work with. And also, it was very evident, not just in the comments, but even in the way the entire team was playing. There was so much conviction in what they were doing. They were not second-guessing themselves. That's what their opponents were doing, which is so surprising for me watching some of these games. So, yeah, maybe it could be that honeymoon period, right? You're with a bunch of new mates. Everything's looking good. You had a great run so far. It's like Maui said, a few months down the line, once Carrigan comes in, once the pressure starts to mount, once teams start figuring them out, will this trend continue? I don't think so. It doesn't usually play out that way.
And while Bleh, we finished on the FaZe talking point, we're going to take a look at a player you've selected for us. Now, due to time constraints, we're only going to have one, but when you take a look at this player, this is a very different approach to Counter-Strike. So we've just had our nitty-gritty looking into the micro movements of teams and some of the rounds going their way, but this round is just raw ability coming in from Config.
And the reason I selected this one is just to talk about, like, this is a crazy round, by the way. EG win the pistol round, clean fashion, and then, of course, Config just pops up. But I want to talk over this. Mirage as a map has been such an important map for complexity. They picked it 3 times in this tournament. They won it every single time, with Config top fragging every single time again. And it's about the amount of roles he plays, both on the CT side and the T side. On the CT side, he's going to be towards the B bomb side. He's not really the anchor. He's going to be floating around towards mid. On the T side, he's going to be playing usually with Poison. Poison's going to try and set him up to try and, get that opening kill. And the thing with Config is, you give him an inch, he's going to take a mile. Even if you don't give him an inch, he's still going to beat you in the face and is still going to take that mile. That's how scary this guy can be. And, just the fact that he is so consistently good, he becomes that sort of config which we used to see years ago when he used to play in some of those Danish lineups he was in. We didn't see this all the time. You see it once in a while, a spark, a moment of brilliance once every 2 or 3 games where he would be unplayable. And right now, the fact that he's looking so good with Poison coming in, Bleh just being a solid rock as well, and the rest of the team just working so well together, he is going to be an instrumental factor, the hammer of complexity. And I feel like we just have more to see from Config in the near future.
And that's a real positive for any CS fan, right, Alex? You know, we're coming into this one and you look at Config as a player that we wanted to see become one of the top players in the world. He has the ability, he has that raw aim ability, but honestly, he dropped off for such a long period of time. We started to think maybe that's where he was just going to drop off forever at Hawka, but he has really started to come into his own again in this complexity team and has really found a role that's working.
Yeah, for sure. And just picking up on Bleh's point there, I think on this team specifically, it's really great that on T's side, you look at that specific round and Rush is flying in first with the Tech 9 in some of those worse entry spots so that Config can kind of follow up. Whereas on past teams, I feel like Config was very often used almost only as that first entry man. But Rush is willing to be the soldier on this team. So if Config wants to be the second man in, he can do that. And he can trade up there with the best of them, as you can see.
Maui, any final thoughts on Config or just complexity as a whole, really, in this event?
I feel like the whole mindset thing, which Hawka brought up way earlier in this, is just, I feel like that's so important with this roster. Finally, the fact that they can play together as the 5 players that they know they're going to be moving forward with, as opposed to this revolving door of oppers. And I mean, you know, I don't think NATO is terrible. I don't think Yugi's terrible, honestly, despite the rep that some people are giving him. But I will say that Poison is better, and Poison is more comfortable in the Bleh system, so that just makes everything so much easier. I mean, just not having to worry about, does he know the exact flash that I want him to throw? And Poison, he does. He knows exactly the smoke that they need from him. He knows that one flash. He knows what his role is in a lot of the different strategies and the system that Bleh has created.
Hold on, Maui. Are you still saying you're on the Yugi? I wouldn't say hype train.
No.
The Yugi train. Are you in the Yugi, whatever the trolley thing they go on a train tracks?
It's like the kids' fun park, you know, the little tiny one.
I think Yugi is pretty mediocre, but I think that it's kind of like, I mean, it's not easy playing in some of the situations that he's been thrust into. Playing as a rifler for Astralis, playing as just into this system that is shown to be pretty tough. The fact that JKS has taken so much time to slot into it, it's probably not the easiest thing to just play under Bleh, actually. You have to get used to it.
Yeah, so basically, like, everyone else is on the Yugi is bad train, and Maui's just, like, not on either train, right? He's just kind of standing on the platform.
He doesn't matter anymore. That's his train. All right. You can
Maui's actually the station conductor, actually, so...
he just likes all trains.
Yeah, well, I think it might be a bit of a train crash right now for Yuki's career in Counter-Strike. We'll see if he can bounce back. But nonetheless, it's time for Vu. We've got him chained down in the dungeon at the minute. He's been watching every game, getting all of the nades ready, spotting all the utility that has been going on throughout Blast Premier, and that'll be coming up right now.
Bomb has been planted.
Hey, this is Vu, and they've got me chained down here watching all of the games, so I figured I'd show you a few pieces of utility that are either new or cool, or you can really expect to see more of in the coming months. And first off, we're going to have Astralis throwing a long A smoke that isn't completely new. In fact, you're seeing several teams in this event throw it, but you're also now seeing some counters to it, and it's really evolving in the meta.
It's just something different, right? They're hoping OG go for long control. They're rewarded. They get the Alexi kill as well as a rotator at mid. He's a huge name tag to grab at mid because, you know, either right or left side, he's usually the player overstacking one side or the other. And Device looking for this punish. Whoa, that's interesting. What's that? That was I guess the first one was a T-smoke. I was like, that wasn't 2 CT smokes, was it? And that tactic gets shut down.
Looking to corral in the middle, man, so he's got to fall off. Alexi blinded.
So that smoke isn't going to light off any fireworks, but it is actually adjusting the way people are taking long, and it does its job very well. So to throw it, get in the corner here, crouch down, and then jump throw. And Device is going to use that. It'll put out the molly and give him a bit of a one-way onto Valde here, but he's put out by a smoke off from Cat for Mantu. Now, if you look at this smoke, it's a pretty effective one-way, very tough to deal with in general for all of it does. does, and really that smoke is one of the best ways to deal with it. And Mantu's going to throw that by getting boosted up on a cat, strafing a little bit wide, and then jump throwing off of the skybox. That'll put it out pretty effectively before we move on to number 2.
And I just like to say, they were in danger of losing that round in a tragic way if they didn't move as fast as they did.
Yep.
Which is a change from what we've seen from their retakes already. It's more deliberate, more confident.
Again?
And Breeze, he goes to copy and paste the same play as last round. And Dirk gets an opening kill with a flash assist from Tarek.
Another!
It's an orchestra of frags for the CT side, and they've got immense control on the round.
Dude, they don't even let off. Stanislaw comes in from apartments. They've already evacuated. Breeze down Banana. He slices through them and exits, leaving nothing but an open wound.
So there's a good chance you've seen a bunch of teams running these mid crunches, and here's how a few teams are running it. This is really the least interesting way to run it. Couple of flashes there from Ethan. He's going to have some support, and then he's going to toss a T-Stairs smoke from Carr. It's really the least interesting way this gets done. You have Tarek throwing a very nice flash here deep off of that wall that Breezy will actually peek off of to grab that kill. You can see the flash assist there is the most interesting part of this version. He also knows the flash is coming and instantly peeks off of it. The more interesting ways this strat is run is actually the following ones I'll show. So this one is the previous round. Tarek throws 1 flash instead of 2, and then we'll move over and throw this smoke, which will land T-Stairs that can give some cover for that mid player to fall back after getting a kill or 2, which is often the toughest part. Then Tarek's going to give a nice thank you to Ethan by nading directly on top of him, but Ethan will grab the kill regardless, and the round does go their way. The way G2 run this is a little bit different. They'll have Amanek throw the smoke from Graveyard instead. I've slowed it down so you can see exactly how he throws this. Either one worked just fine, and they land about the same time regardless, so it doesn't make too much of a difference. But we'll show you how Hunter sees it, and then we'll move on in a second to look at a game on Overpass with another cool smoke.
10th round is coming up now, and again, CTR outside of the B-bomb site, and the rest are off doing something else. Tabson and Searson and Keto still with that 3-man setup, pushing aggressively. And why not? Because they haven't been punished for doing this. There's no reason for them to stop doing it. NIP have not found an answer to this or anything else at the moment. So just everything is still on the table for Big. Keto is here, and he's going to get that one, but quick trade, and they also drop Tabson over at long. So now it's on Searson. He couldn't escape. He wanted to move forward. Didn't want to unscope because that would give the game away. So just like that, it's a 3-for-1 trade.
Next up, this is the one that goes worse than any of these other smokes in the exact highlight. We've got a smoke here that lands deep monster from outside bathrooms, and it doesn't seem like much, but this allows Keto to actually play up with an A side aggression rather than throwing it from CT spawn where they'd be much delayed. And he's going to run it in tandem again with that A aggression. Searson's going to be throwing a smoke here towards T-Stairs. Don't copy it because that one misses. And then he's going to throw a flash for a nice little peek out here from Party off of Tabson, and then they're going to have a nice little piece of utility a little bit later as well, but this is just a well-coordinated strat. It allows Keto again to be supportive when otherwise usually that third player is very delayed. Then you're going to have Tabson there lining up the molly, that's quite nice molly, and a flash that gets thrown, but Rez hears that flash thrown, turns away, and gets the kill. So let's move on quickly to the coolest one yet.
The end of 2020 taught us anything. It's that Astralis and, like, you know, lower bracket comebacks are there.
Pretty much they have better
bread and
odds
butter.
in lower bracket to win the tournament than upper bracket. I think that might actually be a true stat. I'm not sure if it is, but...
Ooh, what you doing, man?
Well, that's crazy. Mantu's actually holding for the lower tunnels push. Searson goes right into it, being farther back from the angle. I mean, that is just genuinely him knowing that Montu could be there with an up holding, but he's got an advantage because there's a wall in front of Montu.
So this nade here, I think, is easily the coolest that we show. It's Searson's going to take 20 points of damage to one-way a nade to try and peek someone T-spawn, and he doesn't find him, so he goes more aggressive and gets the kill anyways. And this is just a beauty. You can throw it to cross or for that one way. Searson here is going to throw it for his teammates to cross. Not a very complicated lineup, and they've got about a second to cross there before Mantu will be able to see anything on the other side of it, as you can see. And this is really reminiscent of something that would be thrown a lot in 2015, as you can see here, when the nade smoke would last a lot longer, so it was easier to throw more consistently. But this is really cool. Now let's move on to one that I think the casters explained perfectly well.
Here from Astralis. Device likes to play aggressive on the CT side when he has that AWP. He decides to play it a little bit, I mean, still here, still looking for the shot, but he will push top mid as well with that off. He's not afraid to.
And this is a beautiful setup actually from Astralis. I've seen this very many times before. They throw that smoke all the way to the barrel. You can see it right here in front of Hampus. That means if anyone is helping and then they flash their way out, and this time they took down CTR. But yeah, that's so cool. I've seen them do that a number of times before. I think they actually throw, I think it's Magus who throws the smoke basically from where the boost spot is. So right as you enter the B area, and then it's a genius setup. It's really cool to see. And it segments, if anyone is out there, they're going to get caught in the flashbangs, and the teammates that are further behind can't actually help out.
So that last one isn't a whole new thing. However, it is a variation that's newer based on something Astralis have done for a while. And I thought Anders did a perfect job of explaining it live, so why even go over it myself? Anyways, this was a few pieces of utility I think you're going to see in the meta in the near future. You're probably going to see more of, so I hope you enjoyed.
Bomb has been planted.
Thank you very much to Vu for putting that one together. We've seen some incredible nades in there, actually, and a couple of callbacks to 2015. I think I was like 14 back then, so definitely remember seeing some of those nades, but it could be a long while. But again, my name is Dinko, joined by the rest of the panel. It's going to be Maui, Snake, Hawka, and Bleh to take us through this one. And Hawka, you learn any nades? We're actually going to win some matchmaking games now.
Bro, I never remember the actual lineups for the nades. Like, I can see it in my head, and I know where that smoke lands, but when I'm in game, it's just all gone, man. It's just all gone from my brain.
Just
at least you're able to remember the key stuff for your job. At least you're not a player. But nonetheless, we are about to get into the MVPs. And the way this tournament works, of course, it was a group stage play. So there's 3 groups. So we're going to pick 3 players that we thought were the standout player of each group. And I mean, when we're taking a look at these 3 players, we're going to start with Searson. I think this player has just come into his own over the last while, right? In the HLTV Top 20 in 2020 after just playing on some of these lesser tier teams, Maui.
Yeah, Searson has been a revelation for this big side, and it feels like big. They're a lineup that frequently will just kind of follow a rule book. I feel like Toby and Tabson put this together in 2020, just this set of protocols, a set of just procedures for how every situation should run. But Searson is one of the players that makes big exciting because he's ready to throw the rule book right out the window and then just take op shots and take lives, take out the opposing teams in ways that they just don't expect.
And when you look at Searson Hawka, you know, he's a player that's been touted to be this big up-and-coming talent, no pun intended, but, you know, he didn't really get his chance. For a very long time, he was playing with Sprout, never really went anywhere with that team, but we knew he had skill, but the fact that he's able to come in and in this system, like Maui was saying, able to deliver like this so consistently is very impressive.
Absolutely. And I would really love to hear from Big themselves how many of the plays that Searson makes are ones that they kind of set up for him and ones that he's calling for himself. Because it feels like they're always having the correct response to Searson making a play. And I also think something they do really well is they are willing to send Searson alone in a lot of spots. And because he's so good, he can actually go into spots alone as an AWPer, which is really hard to do if you don't have the confidence or the comfort of someone there to back you up. It can be really difficult, but having him able to do that, it just adds such an extra element to this big lineup, right? And now all of a sudden, you can't just expect them to play by the numbers like Maui was saying. You've got to be ready for some of the plays he's pulling out, which are crazy.
Do you have any thoughts on Searson as a player, Bleh?
Yeah, I think I just want to add a little bit more on what Hawka mentioned there. Like, if you look at Big as an org, right, as a team, traditionally from way back, they just relied on system, right? Like, I remember when they really had to break out with all the utility usage and whatnot. We're like, God damn, they're executing while exiting the bomb site, right? And once they got the bomb done and everything. And I think it's really, really cool to see an X element like Searson there, where he can fit into the system. At the same time, he can make things a little bit more interesting. And there is something called playing to correct Counter-Strike. Does that make sense? Like, when you approach everything the right way, you become easy to read. I wouldn't say easy to read, but you get predictable at times, especially when it comes to teams who are extremely well drilled with certain protocols. And having someone who's willing to flash himself out, take a peek in a 2v2 or a 3v3 or even a 3v4 scenario and take a fight all on his lonesome while winning those duels, that is a player you want to have on any team. And Searson, I feel he's just the AWPer big needs. Not like a pure textbook AWPer, not a wild gun like some of the other, like some CIS or Brazilian AWPers you might see, who are great to watch, don't get me wrong, but that particular mix of different skill sets that this guy possesses, it just makes Big a much better team.
Well, we were talking about earlier on, Alex, all about how we look at Config, actually, and he's a player that's been such an influential player for this Complexity team. We talked about him quite a bit, but he was the standout player for us coming out of the second group. And you take a look at this player's highlights, man, he just looks so incredible. And I was going through the highlights earlier today, and he's just been hitting some nutty shots. He's got one of the best aims in the world.
Absolutely. And he was not the player that at the end of sort of 2020 was necessarily always number one there for Complexity. I think, though, on recent form, he's actually playing better than Blame F, which is kind of crazy to think about because Blame F was so consistently good for so much of last year. But Config's the one who's been thriving recently. We heard Bleh talk about his Mirage play, which is incredible. This spray down, by the way, in round 30? In round 30, you're just going to do that to them? Okay, that's just stupid. But give this guy an AK on the CT side, man. You see it. I see it all the time. Whenever they have an AK on Complexity, they're giving it to Config because you know he's going to crack some heads.
And Maui, when you look at Config, it's just the amount of rounds he just gets multi-kills in is impressive. He's got this clutch ability as well. He's a very well-rounded player in that respect.
Yeah, I actually I love that you bring that up because the fact that he is able to play late round situations is, I think, a slight evolution in his game. Because before, I think when he was on Dignitas, he was explosive at times, but it was generally just those big spray down holds, those one taps with the AK, just showing off his aim. But the fact that he can now break down situations a little bit, as we see in this clip here, kind of centered around the fact that he does trust his aim a lot in these situations, but he is finding some success. So regardless of how he's playing them, the fact that there is victories when he does play like this, I mean, it's a lot of fun to watch. And I'm never going to really turn down a player that just wants to swing in a late round situation because, Xantarez, Config, sometimes you desire a little bit more. Why aren't they playing around that piece of cover or something like that? But if they hit the shot, I mean, who cares?
And one of the other players that was the MVP for us coming into Group C was, of course, Simple. The man needs no introduction. For me, I personally feel like he's the best player in the world. I know a lot of people have good arguments. He isn't officially, according to the HLTV, but this guy is an animal player, and he was delivering some crucial moments for Navi in the last match against FaZe.
He is the best player in the world. It's a fact. The numbers, you can keep it numbers. It's the feeling that matters. But the thing is, yes, he is the best player, and he shows why. Like, some of the shots he was hitting was absolutely nuts. And for Na'Vi, right, you talk about the Dust 2 and the Nuke. A couple of teams, they went for some risky picks against Na'Vi. I think it was Dust 2, which was picked by FaZe, I believe. And you look at his CD side stats, and it is just simple. He is unplayable, just unplayable. And it's not just about his raw skill, but how well he positions himself, how he puts himself in a spot where he pretty much ensures he's going to win every game. Like, look at Cello here. Right? Like, he's just going to be just shitting bricks. It's, oh, crap, it's simple. Why does it have to be simple? An A-Ramp, like, this is something I can probably touch upon a little later, but he is probably one of the best A-Ramp or, like, in a car long player on Dust 2. Like, just unplayable times. Of course, this is on the T side, but this is a side where he is so comfortable on Dust 2, mid, and long, where it's like, you can imagine having a player like him where you can pretty much give up an entire bomb site or a sector of the map because it's simple with an AWP of his.
Yeah, he actually ends up losing this round, but just the fact that he's able to do so much damage from the position that looked impossible, right? I remember hearing Anders talking about how the fact that in this clutch, he was just not really looking like it was possible at all, but the fact he brings it down just that 1v1 is just impressive. And you touched on the point there, Bleh. You say he's one of the best A ramp players on Dust 2 as an AWPer. That just means he's one of the best AWPers in the world, because that's basically where we see pretty much every AWPer play. But you also touched on the fact he has this sort of confidence about him, and I think Hawka, when you look at him in these 1v1 1v3s. You look at him in these impossible rounds, as many were called him. He just seems like he's still in control. He still doesn't know exactly what the next move is.
Yeah, that's something he's so good at, right? The impossible scenarios, the seemingly impossible scenarios he's able to make happen. I also just wrote down some numbers for this tournament, which I think are ridiculous. So as Bleh pointed out, Unreal CT side, 1.53 CT rating for this tournament. That's already crazy. But then he's also the only Na'Vi player with above a 1.0 rating on the T side. The only one. So he's doing it on both sides. He had a plus 74 KD for this tournament. His next highest teammate was Perfecto with plus 7. He's just doing it all for Na'Vi now.
Yeah, but
that's the
adding points.
That's the best team in the world right now as well, right? I mean, at least according to the ranking. So that's nuts.
The amount of rounds I see Maui where it just looks like Na'Vi sometimes just don't know what they're doing, and like Simple can just pull them into these scenarios and make them look relevant. And the fact that the #1 team in the world, if you remove Simple and Electronic, obviously probably one of the best duos we've ever had in Counter-Strike, this team become pretty average, right? But I think when you look at Na'Vi across the board, he has made them an elite force just by the fact that he is just so good in so many rounds and so consistent at it as well. I mean, we've seen what happened to Zywoo when the system kind of fell around him, right? There was problems over there in the Vitality camp. Simple doesn't have a system. You know, he is the system, and he's just so good at playing in those chaotic situations.
Yeah. Can I give my vote for who the MVP is? Can I say it? Okay, it's simple. It's simple. There's just no way Na'Vi win their group if he doesn't play at this level. Config, I mean, I think he has a really good shout here, and I feel like also Surson did a lot of work too to help Big in their victory, but take away just Simple on Na'Vi and give me Zywoo. I don't even care. Give me Zywoo there, and they don't win this group. They don't do as well. Like, Simple just wins too many rounds for them out of thin air. He just pulls rabbits out of hats constantly. He has an infinite supply of rabbits. This guy could solve world hunger right now with the amount of rabbits that this dude is just pulling out of hats constantly. And Zywoo, he had his worst game of the tournament here, and we're not even talking about him as the MVP, but it just shows that Zywoo, he's a product of his system, and he can also be a failure of it at times. Whereas Simple, like Bleh said, he is the system, or like all of you guys said, I mean, he's the system. He does it all. He's just so impactful in every single game, every single round. I mean, I love what Surson brought to this tournament. I love what Config did as well. I feel like they're going to be top players this year if this performance has anything to say about what the future holds for them. But Simple, man, you just can't argue with this guy.
No, he's just unbelievable. Just from that eye test, you see how good he is. And Bleh, you want to really take a closer look at some of the stats. And the wonderful people over at CSGO Spotlight, they're fantastic. Two guys I've met and had a meeting with about they're making a stat software where they make stat packages. And you can take a closer look at some heat maps and look at some scenarios played out. And it's all done in a very nice, simple package you can look through. And speaking of simple, you're going to take a look at using the CSGO Spotlight software to show us one of his halves.
Yeah, firstly, I have been super excited about what these guys have done. And this is just one aspect of what they do, right? It's just a heat map. And what I've chosen here is primarily Simple's actions on the 2 Dust 2 games they played. Now, there are a lot of colors here. I'm going to take away all of them, and I'm only going to highlight the kills he's gotten so far on Dust 2. One against MIBR, the second against FaZe. And all these kills are on the CT side. You can clearly see where it's taking place, mainly towards long. Like I said, the long ramp area, and then you have the long, the car area, the number of kills he gets from that position. And if you hover over each and every one of them, they actually shows you where he gets to kill as well. There we go, just load for me. I hope it's loading for you guys on the stream as well. And then you take a look at the kills he gets towards the B bomb side. These are the ones he got while retaking, actually, sneaking in from lower tunnels. And it boggles the mind. 38 kills, 9 deaths over 2 CT sides. And let's take a look at his AWP kills as well, right? Just quickly take a gander. Majority are killed with the AWP. Like, again, mid and long, he's just unplayable. Even one kill he gets sneaking in all the way from towards T-spawn with the AWP in one of those rounds. And let's take a look at his deaths. And this is where it really highlights how goddamn good, or rather, what a god he is. Look at the number of deaths he has, and look at this long area. He dies once towards ramp, and this was when he was taken down by Dinko from MIBR with the AWP, but that's it. He just hasn't died at all to this long area with the AWP. A few times towards city spawn where players pushed him or flanked him from mid. He has lost a few duels towards mid, but that's about it, just like 2 or 3. And then a couple of them were when he was going for aggressive plays towards short or maybe towards pit over here. But apart from that, he just doesn't seem to die in some of the positions he's playing, which is ridiculous. Like, how do you work with that? I mean, that's pretty much all I wanted to highlight over here. But how do you deal with someone who doesn't die? Like, is he human? Is he a machine? Like,
he is the Undertaker. It all adds up.
He's undead. Like, you kill him, he comes back up again. And just looking at this map for me, I was just like, holy shit, the guy's a freak, man. Zai was a great player, but Simple's a freak.
Yeah, he is just a freak of nature, really. You know, when you take a look at him, it just reminds you of that. I don't watch WWE, but I'm pretty sure the Undertaker had some sort of brother who killed him. He came back. I mean, Zywo was just gonna look at Simple, and every year I feel like Simple is just gonna get. Kane, that's the one. But yeah, I feel like that's the rivalry really going into this year. But we'll see how that plays out with Vitality kind of down the bin at the minute. We'll see if they can pick it up. But Simple, by far, in my opinion, best player in the world, just by his raw ability, his potential, just turning impossible rounds into winnable ones. But Hawka, you wanted to touch on Big. Now, you've been a bit of a big fanboy over on your YouTube channel over the past couple of videos, and you wanted to look at their Vertigo. Now, Vertigo is not a great map, but you want to show us how Big played.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at it because they've been picking Vertigo a little bit more lately. I think Big's map picks have been pretty interesting. They've been shifting it around from Dust 2s to Mirages. Now Vertigo seems to be a map they're willing to pick pretty often. And right here, we're looking at all of the overall team's entry kills on their T side. And these are specifically the entry kills where they ended up planting the bomb on the A site. So you can kind of see they're doing a pretty decent job at spreading it. Even sometimes when they get some kills towards mid or B, they are finishing towards A. But a lot of these kills obviously come towards A. Then I'm going to show you the entry kills they got where they entered the B site and got the bomb down. And that's right, there's only one on here. There's only one time that they did this, got an entry in Web B, over I think 30 rounds or so that they played on Vertigo. So that already goes to show that there's been a lot of talk about Big's Vertigo being really good. They are still absolutely exploiting the A site a lot of the time. And we can also take a look at some of the smoke grenades they're using, because I think something they are doing pretty well is they are making sure that they use their smokes on both sides of the map to at least keep some pressure on. So you see this smoke here is one that Kito's been plopping down towards B to keep some pressure. These are the smokes they're throwing when they're ending on the B site. So you can see again, pretty decent spread across the map. You even have a couple of rounds where they're throwing these smokes towards A and they are ending towards B. And then you can do the same thing. These are the rounds where Big are finishing on the A site. And again, you get a similar cluster of smokes, occasionally over towards B, occasionally over towards mid. But this time you just get all these bloody smokes on the A site, which we know and probably hate if you've seen a lot of Vertigo recently. But I just wanted to look at overall the way that Big, I think, masks sometimes the fact that they're going towards A and are able to pressure other areas of the map is really good, because I think that's the most important thing you need to do on Vertigo right now. You just need to keep some pressure across the map, and then you kind of always have that A finish in mind. And Big were really good at using that in this very tournament.
When we look at Vertigo, it's a map that we've seen in this tournament, Alex. We were watching some of the Blast games together, and we were just watching some ridiculous rounds play out. Just this constant A attack. You see the smokes go down, and then you just see 10 players in the server spray their entire magazine through the smoke. Oh, one player gets a kill, then we have a 5v4 retake or post plan. To me, that's just not the Counter-Strike I love. And I don't know about you, Maui, but I want to hear your thoughts on Vertigo, because I know Maui's Nick, I know Bleh's opinion here, but I know Hawka's opinion, but I want to know what you think.
I think Vertigo is just failure in map design that has gone way too far. This is
Thank you.
The joke needs to end like now. This is we know this is bad, right? Because right now I think people are experiencing a little bit of Stockholm syndrome, where we've just seen so much Vertigo at this point. We're like, yeah, this is kind of good, right? But then let's actually think about like proper design philosophy.
People are starting to miss Cobblestone, Maui.
Yeah,
that's when you know it's gone too far.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just how far do we have to keep going with this until we just like, are our brains going to just forget the fact that this has so many flaws in it? Because I will say, I think Launders has tweeted out, I'm really in the same boat when I'm trying to analyze games on desks, that it's not fun to talk about that this key kill was a kill through smoke where people were just randomly spraying. And I love the strategy. I love the, you know, all the kind of the executes and everything like that, and how just the way teams like to take ramp on the CT side. I think it's a lot of fun to watch at sometimes, but overall, I just feel like it leads to a boring narrative a lot by the end of a lot of matches.
I just want to add on as well. A lot of people's defense for Vertigo would be, oh, it's a different map design. It's the, you know, it's a vertical approach to map design. I'm like, Nuke did it better. Nuke did it way better, and they managed to fix a lot of issues the previous edition of Nuke had. And if you look at an evolution of vertical map design, Overpass is something not a lot of people talk about. It actually is a vertical map design if you look at a bomb sites as well. But I feel like it's a more evolved version of what Nuke originally was. Something in that direction would be good, I feel. And like Maui said, there are some bits of Vertigo I do like to watch, but when the majority of these really crucial rounds and games boil down to people just spraying through the smoke, I mean, I'm sorry. Like, our job is to analyze. You can't analyze that. I'm going to be out of a job soon.
So we all agree, just putting Vertigo in the bin is the right move moving forward, or at least this version, just kind of figure something out. I think, because you brought the point of Overpass, Blood, that map sucked when it came into the pool, right? It took a long time to get in a good place. They reworked Cobblestone, and they've actually just completely removed the A-bomb site. It's actually just a gathering of, I don't know, coffins or something in the middle of just an open space. So just never bring that map back in its current form. I played a show match on it. I lost 16-4 against Mitch. Now, if that had been a different map, certainly would have won. It's just not a good map. But nonetheless, that was the CSGO Spotlight by Spotlight at CSGO. You can go on Twitter. Their Twitter is at Spotlight CSGO. They've got some really cool stuff coming. This is actually like really early on in the development stage, and I've seen what those guys had a couple of weeks ago compared to what they have now, and it's they've done a really good job. So definitely keep an eye on those guys. Spotlight CSGO on Twitter, and we'll be seeing what they can do in the future as well. But I think we're starting to come up to the end of the show, ladies and gentlemen, and we're just gonna sort of have our final thoughts of Blast, really, because there was a lot of action that went down. This group format, I enjoyed. I think it's good the way we only have 2 games in the day. It's very easy to digest this kind of content. But we have more Counter-Strike coming up, and the tournament coming up will be IM Katowice. Now, heading into this tournament, just very briefly across the board, what are your guys' thoughts? And we'll start with you, Hawka.
Ooh, man, there's a lot to go into here because you have the play-in as well, which some of the teams have to play through to even get to the tournament, which is starting tomorrow. I think just in general, it's nice to have some of the top tier events back, right? Like you said, this Blast group stage, I think was a really nice way to come back in kind of from the player break. I know we had the Blast finals beforehand because of the weird scheduling stuff that happened, but it was a nice look at the teams in a more chilled out format. Now we're really going to get to properly see the top teams compete against each other. And like I was saying earlier, the main thing on my mind is Astralis with a bit more time. Can they put it together with the team play? Can they try and prove they are still the top team? Because even though Na'Vi got the wins here, they needed to at Blast, it was a professional job, but I don't think they hit the peak that you necessarily would want to say, we are 100% the #1 team in the world. I feel like people are saying it right now just because of some of the other teams faltering. So this really comes down to who is going to prove that they can be the best team coming off the back of the player break. I think a lot of it comes down to this tournament because the teams have had some time to get up to speed now.
Well, last year, just a year ago in Katowice, we seen Na'Vi actually lift the trophy there. The last big LAN event, almost a year ago. It's pretty crazy to think about. But Na'Vi, we expected after that tournament, the way they just straight up demolished teams in that tournament, we expected them to be the #1 team. But they've gone through some transitions. They've had a lot of turbulent times. Like Hawka said in the previous tournament, they look good, but we know they can go even further. So Maui, this is coming up to a year we've had Perfecto in this team. So I feel like he's definitely grown into this. I think at the start he looked a little uncomfortable, but I think he's a pretty underrated player in the fact that he can deliver so many crucial roles for this Na'Vi team.
Yeah, I think that Perfecto has just gotten better in his role. I think Boomich is a little bit better as an IGL now as well. I feel like that beginning for him was a little bit rocky. There was a lot of rounds that just ended very awkwardly for Na'Vi, even as recently as a few months ago. But I feel like the way that he's developed as an individual has made kind of the calling style of Navi based around just him and Simple playing for a lot of info, and then the other players just kind of doing their jobs beyond that. Electronic will take a lot of fights and take map control himself too. So there's a lot of different weapons for Navi, and that's something I'm really liking because you're spotting the fact that Perfecto's improving. I think Boomage is doing a really great job nowadays, and if they can find the right balance between the Bit versus Flamey, when should we use who, and for what kind of situations or maps, I feel like Navi is probably just going to stay a top 3 team for the rest of this year. We can't. It's just so hard to game plan around this roster sometimes.
Well, Bleh, we're looking at Katowice starting tomorrow as the play, and we've got plenty of action coming up. What are you most excited about Katowice? Obviously, it's not going to be the same LAN. We're not going to get to see the players play in the Spodek, but it's still going to be a gathering of incredible teams, and it'll still a lot of money on the line. So there's definitely a lot to look at going into Katowice. It'll still be a prestigious event. So what are you most looking forward to here?
Well, I mean, if Blast was a bit of a cock tease, in a good way altogether, because you look at the 3 groups, you look at the teams, you want to see big play against Navi. You want to see, these teams, like the top teams, at least in those groups, you face off against each other, which unfortunately, because of the way the groups are laid out, again, not Blast's fault, of course, but I wanted to see more of that. And coming to Katowice, you get to see all of them face off against each other, right? So it's going to be finally everything coming to fruition, at least for me personally. It's going to be a climactic, fruition of everything we've seen so far in the past 1 month, so to speak. One criticism I do have, and I think this has been pointed out as well, is the play and having best of 1 openers. I don't know why. I mean, look, it's happening online. Everything's best of 3 right now. It's kind of the standard we've kind of used to, right? And I'm sure it could be because of the scheduling issues and whatnot, but I feel like, just a couple of extra streams, we get to see Renegades play mouse sports, right? That's something, at least for me, is something which excites me. But then you look at it as a best of 1, you're like, that kind of sucks. You see Liquid versus MIBR, you see OG versus the new look Fnatic, and these are all going to be best of 1s. Now, of course, they have best of 3, upper bracket quarterfinals and all those things, but it being throughout best of 3s would be nice because I feel like that's a standard right now, the de facto standard for the past 1 year with the COVID scenario and everything. So that's the only criticism I have. But yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be wild. And we finally get to see if some of the wins we saw in Blast were flukes or not.
Well, that's about it, ladies and gentlemen, for our first episode of Post Planned. It's CSGO After Show. We're going to take a closer look at some of the best plays we like from the previous tournament, follow all the storylines. I think it went pretty well, considering it was only 9 days. We had to prepare and come up with this idea, decided to text Maui Snake and said, do you want to do this thing? And we all made it work within 9 days. So we did it pretty well, I think. Shout out to the producer, Dark, for doing an incredible job. There actually no hiccups, barely any rehearsal. We had like 10 minutes before this. So shout out to Dark.
There we go.
Yeah, there was barely any rehearsal, no rehearsal. And Dark did an incredible job, not messing up, not doing anything. It was a pretty smooth show. And so if you want to give him a follow, head over to Twitter, dark_AV. That's his Twitter. You can follow him over there. And this is going to be uploaded on YouTube at my YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/Dinko TV. And we'll get this VOD, we'll clip it up. You guys can take a look. It'll be on Reddit as well, so keep an eye out for that. If you want to upvote this content, that would be appreciated. But thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in. We'll be right back at the grand final of IEM Katowice. After the event is wrapped up, we'll have the show live. You'll see plenty of tweets over on our Twitter, and we'll see you guys then.